Welcome to a Popaholics show about hot takes hotter than pancakes. The home of Marvel fanboys always defending. What is a podcast but a conversation that's never ending? If this is your first time to the show, welcome to Popaholics. I am your hostess with the mostest, and I'm joined by two boys with the lastest.
Oh, Chris Conkling.
And Brian Dupree.
Yeah, they're all right. But we are also joined, returning to talk about something very cool in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The boys and I, we were like, let's dial up the pros. And I was like, who's a nerd? Who do I know that's a nerd?
Certified Nerd by Tom King.
Certified Tom King nerd and his amigo mejor, James Barnes and Vash.
What's up, guys? So happy to be back.
Buenas noches, ¿cómo está? Muchas gracias por traerme aquí.
Yeah. Well, mucho bueno to have you here, Vash.
Gracias.
Gracias. Go! Sorry. You guys are from the C4S Villains podcast, and we are and the Anime Lately, of course. How could I forget? And we're so happy to have you. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, it's an honor to be back. I love being on any episode I can get on with you guys, so let's get it.
We need to do a James episode count to figure out how many episodes he's been on at this point.
And this is my second with James, so it's an honor to be here with my co-host, host here from Villains. So it's an honor to be here with him. So it's a privilege to come back for the second show within the same year of 2021.
Yeah, man.
Welcome back to both of you. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here.
Yeah.
Muchas gracias.
And we're going to be talking about, it's just going to be me and Vash talking Spanish. Sorry if it's exclusionary, but we are trying to broaden our horizons of who we connect to, Popaholics. So if this is your first time on the show, what do we do here? Well, we have our weekly uploads. That's not this episode. That was Monday's ep. And that's where we talk about the latest in pop culture and what we've been consuming. But you have found yourself on a main topic episode where we theme our months. And this month's theme is Wandavision. We are celebrating the release of Wandavision. And the theme around that, it's not Wandavision, it's not the theme. The theme is a theme of Wandavision, which is distorted reality. See? I went in circles, came back to it.
You made it happen.
It's a complete circle. So this is actually the Wandavision episode. The season finale just aired as of recording last night. For listeners, it'll be last week. So hopefully you're caught up on that. I'm so excited to dive into it. But before we do, I did want to shout out, if you want an even nerd, this is going to be a light romp, a light conversation. We're going to contextualize it. But if you want a nerdy deep dive into this, I would recommend, after listening to this and all other episodes of Popaholics, checking out the C4S Villains show. Chris, you were a guest on that, and you guys wrapped up the season finale in, I'm not joking, I'm pretty sure, a 3-hour-long conversation. I only know this because I was listening to it yesterday, and I checked the time, and I'm at 1 hour and 45, and the meter is not all the way done. It's incredibly dense.
I think we clocked in at like 2 hours and 16 minutes or something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it was like 2:16, yeah.
Yeah, but it was lengthy and nerdy and in-depth. And I love being on the Villains podcast. I absolutely recommend watching it if you guys have not yet.
Thank you.
It's such a good
Appreciate
show.
that.
Yeah, so go check that out after you listen to every single episode of the Popaholics. But then you can go check them out. We'll give you that bump. We'll give you the Popaholics bump. All right. Without further ado, let's dive into Wandavision.
Heavenly shades of night are falling. It's twilight time.
Wanda and Vision, aren't we a five-pair?
This is our home now. I want us to fit in.
Oh, this is gonna be a gas!
Where did you two move from? How long have you been married, and why don't you have children yet?
Our story.
I think what my wife means to say is that we moved from...
Moved from where? Married when? Damn it, why?
Oh, Arthur, stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
Deep in the dark, darkness will thrill.
Is this really happening?
Like days of old, lighting the spark of love that fills me.
That is from the trailer of WandaVision, now streaming on your local Disney Plus. And it was directed by Matt Shakman, created by Jac Schaeffer. Theme music composed by Kristen Anderson-Lopez and Robert Lopez. Score by Christophe Beck. With a reported budget of $225 million, it is currently justifying the existence of Disney Plus and its 3 billion subscribers. And it stars Elizabeth Olsen as the titular Wanda Maximoff and Paul Bettany as the co-titular Vision, the Vision, and Kathryn Hahn as Agnes, Tanya Parris as Monica Rambeau, Randall Park as Jimmy Woo, Kat Dennings as Darcy Lewis, and some others. I'm actually not going to go into some of those others because we're going to be spoiling it right off the bat. So if you haven't seen all of WandaVision and you're about to binge it, I know a lot of people that are waiting to binge it, and you just want some non-spoiler takes, we got them for you. We're going to talk about our history of the sitcom genre and our non-spoiler opinions, and then we're going to go into spoilers and discuss the themes, our favorite episodes, our favorite moments, least favorite moments, and discuss the MCU and the context of this in the MCU. So it should be a cool, tight show. We're not going to be running 2 hours and 15 minutes on here. No, we'll save that for the real pros. So
Thank you.
Even though half that podcast is on this show. So let's get into it. What is our history with the sitcom genre? We'll start with you, Mr. James Barnes.
I'm not the biggest sitcom guy, but when I was sitting down earlier today and just thinking about all of the sitcoms that I've seen quite a bit of them, and I realized how much I do like sitcoms. So I remember watching reruns of I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, I Love Lucy with like my mom and stuff, and having just a blast watching those shows. Like today, one of my favorite sitcoms is Community. I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Office, Parks and Rec, Arrested Development. Like I love these shows and what they've done for the sitcom genre and for comedy. So yeah, I mean, those were just some of the ones that I wanted to highlight that I've had like such a blast with and have actually had like a huge impact on my life and like my humor and the kind of stuff that I like. So yeah, love sitcoms.
For me, I was late in the game with sitcoms. I was mostly with cartoons and anime when I was much younger. But I grew up with them after like late night watching Drake and Josh, watching Friends, and then growing up with How I Met Your Mother, and then Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one of my favorites and everything. So I was late in the game, but I started watching Community last year, which I just got into. So I'm slowly catching up with my sitcoms, but I know the older ones, like what James mentioned, about Bewitched, about Lucy, and those much older ones that happen with this reference in WandaVision. But I was late in the game with the genre itself.
Never too late. Sitcom genre has been going on forever. I think we're all late to the situational comedy based on all of our ages.
Based on how long that genre has existed, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're not alone, Vash. Chris, your history with sitcoms.
You know, sitcoms have always kind of been a fixture in my life. Going all the way back to when I was a kid, watching like I Love Lucy and Bewitched and The Munsters on Nick at Night.
Oh, The Munsters.
You know? And kind of really thinking about this question when I was writing the show notes, I began to realize, similar to James, that like there has always been a variety of sitcoms that could define like what age I was at the time. So like it started with watching Nick at Night, but I was also watching like current sitcoms like Boy Meets World or Sabrina the Teenage Witch on TGIF on Fridays. Watching Malcolm in the Middle. Vash just mentioned How I Met Your Mother when I was in college. Friends in the 90s growing up. Like, even now, my wife and I will sit down to dinner and we will watch our current sitcoms. Like, currently, a couple years ago, we wrapped up Fresh Off the Boat when that finished, and we were watching that as it aired weekly. We're still watching sitcoms like Superstore or American Housewife. Or
how could I forget Superstore? It's one of my favorites right now. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No worries.
Seen it.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine as well. Like
my favorite.
I don't think there's been a point in my life where I haven't been watching sitcoms. Just because it's a part of pop culture, and I was talking to James about this a little bit before the podcast. But the genre of sitcoms is such a huge part of American pop culture specifically, I think. It is absolutely penetrated the pop culture zeitgeist here in America. Like, whether or not you think you like sitcoms or not, I think you have unintentionally watched probably a lot of sitcoms if you're watching American television. So I that's kind of my experience with that genre. It's always been a piece of my life since I was a young kid.
Brian.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Once I started thinking about it and looking up sitcoms from the 90s, I've watched so many sitcoms. Like you guys said, all the stuff on Nick at Night from back in the day, the Brady Bunch. My dad was a big fan of the Wonder Years. I watched a decent bit.
That's a great show.
Way back in the day. Seinfeld. I definitely grew up on Seinfeld. My dad got into that very late, and I was lucky for it because that was on all the time. But I was also watching Saved by the Bell, Fresh Prince, like you said, Boy Meets World, Chris, moving into like Family Guy, that 70s show. That was like a different like middle school, early high school time. 30 Rock and Parks and Rec are some of my favorites.
I didn't even mention The Office. Sorry, you just reminded me of that.
Oh, yeah, right, of course. Things like Scrubs and It's Always Sunny.
Scrubs.
Just there's so many. And looking back, it's similarly, I felt like, okay, I've always been watching some variety of sitcom.
You know, sorry to chime in here one more time, Brian, but like,
no, you're good.
After you mentioning all those shows that I completely forgot about, which is a travesty.
And I'm sure there's a bunch more, right?
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
Like I said, sitcoms make up like 90% of American television, I think. And everything that we just listed kind of
used to be
proves
Westerns.
that, you know?
Bounty Law.
Yes.
I have an interesting relationship with the situational comedy. And Chris, as you said, you made a great point. It's a very distinctly American thing. You know, it's almost like the closest thing we have to like theater. It's like popular, you know, theater for like made for TV. It's part of an era that was learning how to use the medium, and it's really stuck around. And it hasn't really been until the last 15, 20 years that really we've broken from the traditional 3-camera setup. You know, now you guys have mentioned The Office and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Those have detached from the live audience and all that. And they're kind of in their own modern family level of sitcom. And I always had a soft spot in my heart for Boy Meets World. Was one of my favorites growing up. I've seen every episode of that probably 600 times. And all the classics. I actually used to watch TV Land and the Turner Classic Movies and whatever, where they'd have I Love Lucy reruns. And those are always just like ways to decompress. And I mean, you're really not engaged other than just being like, it's ridiculous. You agree it's ridiculous. And it's this hyper form of reality. And I found that I grew out of it distinctly in college. I think I was going through something. I was probably like really depressed and probably eating a bunch and probably like down on my feels. Because I remember spending a lot of time not socializing as I should have been for like one specific year in college and just watching all of How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah.
And I binged maybe like all of it, like almost all of it. I remember it was like 6 seasons of it in a row. And I wasn't doing much of anything else. And I'm looking back on it, I'm thinking, wow, I was really depressed. And that was a way that I was like coping with depression. So I think it's a very, and since then, I have not revisited sitcoms. I have a rule on this show, as you all may know, except for the most exceptional of sitcoms like Seinfeld or It's Always Sunny or Arrested Development. I do 2 seasons and then I'm pretty burnt out, and I will still enjoy the one-off episode that comes on, but it's like I won't let myself go back into the vegetative state of just binging a sitcom and turning my brain off for that long. And nothing against people that do. I just personally feel that college depression just sneaking back in like a warm blanket over my body, telling me it's all gonna, you don't have to do anything today. You just got to see what Ted's up to. What's Ted up to today? Oh, no.
All right, I'll make an exception for binging Ted Lasso, though. I'm going to be honest.
Well, but again, that's like, again, we're still in first season.
Season 1, yeah, I know. Fair enough.
Yeah, exactly. And so I find myself not wanting to get coaxed into that elongated time that someone spends with a sitcom, which I found very interesting because our main character, I think we learn, has a relationship that is oddly similar that I definitely vibed with.
You know, Christian.
I mean, thanks for sharing that, dude, because like I go through like stages of like supreme depression sometimes, like. And then my go-to right now is Superstore. Like when I'm having a really, really bad day, I know I can turn on like any episode of Superstore and I will laugh my ass off and I'll feel great right after. Like that's my comfort show. Like we're caught up on the show in season 6 right now, and then we just started back at season 1, episode 1, because it's just my comfort zone. So it's like,
that's awesome, man.
Thank you for sharing that. That made me think about like how I've used sitcoms to like cope with stuff sometimes. So yeah,
which is totally understandable,
food, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, Christian, 2 points I want to make, having just heard what you said. The 3 sitcoms that you said you'll continuously go back to all have something very similar in common, and that is they are 3 sitcoms about terrible people. Seinfeld, Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and Arrested Development. All 3 are just about god-awful people, but it's so entertaining to watch.
Largely true.
I would say, and also are supremely ingeniously written. That is also another
100%. Those are three of the best sitcoms ever created.
So I've never seen Seinfeld.
Oh my God, you have to watch it, bro. I think you would like it.
Oh,
there's definitely stuff. There's episodes where it's like, okay, yeah, this is dated. This would be written differently today.
Yeah.
But all in all, it's definitely worth checking out, I think.
At least check out the first couple episodes, see if it vibes with you. But
not even the first couple episodes. Look at some famous episodes, because the first season, it took them a little while to fall into the groove of what it became and like having their characters solidified. So I think
it's not disinterest or anything. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah,
you know?
There's so much out there that's totally understandable.
It's intimidating too.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's, what, 9 seasons massive. Or something?
Yeah.
And then I also want to mention in college, during one of our film courses, Christian, I'm not sure if you had the same assignment, but we were tasked with dissecting a Friends script. And literally in the script, while doing the breakdown, you see markers for how hard the laugh track is going to play. So it's like Joey says big joke, like laugh, medium laugh. Chandler says small joke, small laugh.
Did they not honestly, even write the joke? They didn't even have the joke yet. They were just like
no, it was the joke. I just can't remember like exactly what the jokes were. But like you would see the how funny they wanted the joke to be, and it would be determined, and they would write how hard they wanted the laugh track to play.
65%.
And honestly, the last show that I was able to get through with the laugh track because of that assignment was How I Met Your Mother. And unfortunately, I had that assignment at like the very end of that show, so I still had like 2 seasons to go airing. And those last 2 seasons were a little brutal for me. I loved them, but every time I heard that laugh track, I would like have horrible flashbacks to that assignment and be like, this is horrible. Like, we need to get rid of laugh tracks in television immediately. But
that's interesting. And transitioning into talking about our opinions of WandaVision, you know, there are episodes that have a laugh track.
Yes.
You know, non-spoilers say that there are a lot of sitcom elements, hence why we opened up with the conversation about sitcoms. And there's a laugh track for several episodes. But you know, I found it odd that it just because it was, you know, a show within a show kind of thing, you're able to like justify it, and it's because it's homage. It's like the laugh track was part of the joy of watching it, right?
Yeah,
definitely.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's get into our opinions on WandaVision. Non-spoiler opinions. So we can just say the premise of the show is that Wanda and Vision are seemingly in a sitcom reality. And mystery ensues as far as, you know, how did they get there? What's going on? Lots of questions that you'd be asking. But essentially, it's them living as a small family unit in this kind of false reality of a sitcom world. So let's start with you, James. What are your overall impressions of WandaVision?
I absolutely loved the show. Like when WandaVision was getting started, I knew I would like the show, right? I knew I wanted to get into the world of Vision and Wanda and how they could play with like the House of M storyline, because that's what I thought it would be, right? Seeing from the trailers and everything. And I knew I would like it, but I did not know that I would end up loving it as much as I do. I didn't think that I would say that WandaVision is the single best written thing in the MCU, hands down. I don't think there is...
Sir, you're insane.
But he's not
just
wrong.
My opinion, man.
I am with him on this boat. I am with him.
In terms of just straight up writing, dialogue, the way it all plays out, I think this is the single best thing that they've created as far as a script goes. And I absolutely love this show.
What?
Yes.
Yes, I agree with James as well. I'm on this boat.
We should have done this podcast much later down the road. I really am gonna say I'm saving this.
It's not my favorite thing in the MCU, but just in terms of writing, in terms of that aspect, I think it's the best.
Not to say the writing isn't strong. I'm not disagreeing that there's not a lot of strong writing. I just that is a stance for sure. Vash, your overall impressions.
Well, I'm here with James on this ball as well because I had low expectation for WandaVision. Those are two characters that had any type of on-screen chemistry, and we knew about them from comics. We knew that they have a love, relationship, love type of dynamic, but we never saw it on screen within the Avengers film, Age of Ultron, and all these type of films that happened in these 23 films of them being involved. However, with WandaVision being the first to come out, and when me and James doing the weekly coverage and everything, I was excited. I'm a comic book fan, but I also like the MCU. And it far exceeded my expectation. I'm with James. It's one of the best written shows and script from the MCU itself. It's very vast, and they did the best they could. Did they stick the landing on every type of storyline that they want to do? It depends on how you see it, but for me, I was actually satisfied with what I saw and with what vision they wanted to bring, pun intended. And it's very entertaining from what in my stance to see. Very hard to do non-spoiler, you know that? I'm not very good at that, and James could agree with me here, so I'm trying to figure out. Other than that, I was very entertained. That's what I can add for the non-spoiler aspect.
I would encourage you, I know you guys over there aren't so careful for spoilers on your side of the network. But I have challenged
That's
Chris.
the disclaimer in the title of the network, though, man. Like, look, if you're showing up to a Careful for Spoilers production, just assume.
It's a deep dive.
Yeah.
I've only had one person comment under a video and say that I spoiled it. The name of the channel is Careful for Spoilers.
Right.
In the description of the video, the title says spoiler review. And apparently I spoiled it for him.
You can only do so much.
Just read.
Well, that one user was Mephisto, so
just playing games.
Chris.
So I have to agree with James and Vash. This is one of my favorite pieces of content that has come out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not only does this show pay wonderful homage
28 movies.
Not only does this show pay wonderful homage to the sitcom genre over the last 70 years, but it's also the most emotionally intelligent thing that has come out of this franchise. It explores some things that we haven't had time to explore in previous MCU films, which is understandable considering that, the longest one clocks in at 3 hours and this is a 6-hour production. But I think I 100% agree with James and Vash that, at least in terms of the scripts and the writing of this show, it is some of the strongest work that they've put out. Delivery, that varies a little bit, but overall, I really did have a wonderful time watching this show and thoroughly enjoyed the ride. I loved it.
Very cool. Brian.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say it's the best written thing necessarily.
Finally!
But I'll temper it a little bit here. But it is, $225 million. It shows. The show is consistently ridiculously quality production on screen. It gets a little bit Marvel samey at the end in some ways, but it's kind of to be expected. All the homages were really excellently done, and I think especially if you grew up watching Nick at Night, watching these later sitcoms, there's a lot to enjoy there. The theme songs, every week's theme song was just a joy to listen to, and very catchy, relevant to the stories. Easter eggs, C4S Villains, being able to see people who are very knowledgeable about the comics, deep dive and theorize the show, having its meta elements, making us aware that we're watching a show to some degree. It felt, at the very least, made me very hopeful for what Marvel could do in the future, even if, like you said, Vash, they didn't maybe stick the landing in a lot of ways. It was really experimental for them and dark in a lot of ways that they don't get this dark often. I think that's kind of my general opinions. I would definitely recommend this show. If you're a fan of the MCU, it's an easy recommend for me.
Okay, so I am overall pretty warm on the show, pretty hot on the show. I like it quite a bit, and I think there are a number of redeeming qualities and a number of great things that are happening. I by far would not say that this contains the best, right? There is a whole element to the show that is some of the worst Marvel stuff that they ever do, and it's the same kind of stuff that they always fail at. There's an element, a group of individuals that are introduced halfway through the show. And everything happening with this entire section of individuals that we'll get to in spoilers is bad writing. It's bad writing. It's not interesting. People's motivations are bad. They don't build up kind of some of the antagonists very well. I mean, that stuff's just
I know
like
what you're talking about.
Classically bad. Well, I know we both watched the show. It's just like classically bad, stupid Marvel bullshit. On top of that, they have one of the best emotional story arcs throughout. And I think it is some of the strongest emotional story arcs. It's just bogged down and it's surrounded by some of this really terrible writing, which means that overall, it is definitely not the best writing. See any of the Russo movies. Those are way better written on almost every single level. And you're crazy for thinking different. I know why you think different, because I do think there are some genuinely, by the end of the show, I was feeling emotional. There was parts that were definitely getting to me. I think it didn't hit the highs of clearly like Endgame or Infinity War. Like Infinity War and Endgame have some moments that you're just like, you're done. You're out cold, right? And they're doing so by the story that they've written and hinging on the past before it. I'm really very excited that we've gotten Vision and Wanda, played by Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen, who are really great actors, Paul Bettany especially, and they get to strut. They get to strut around a whole bunch, and they're written very well, and they're the best parts of the show. Their characters are fleshed out. I also want to shout out Kathryn. Hahn plays a significant side character.
Wonderful.
She is wonderful. Even when her character goes to some ridiculous, I think that's being played exactly how it's written, which isn't great, but that is not her fault. But I love seeing her on stage. She's magnetic. And from the moment she steps on in the first episode, I was like, oh, she's like one of my favorite parts of the show, before it even develops further. So, and that $230 million budget. I mean, there's just so many like nice production things. I mean, it's just it's like one of the best produced shows from a production standpoint, as far as set design.
Yeah.
Special effects for a quote unquote TV, when let's be honest, this is really like a 4-hour Marvel movie at the end of the day, as far as the production goes. I mean, this is a show that has a 40-minute runtime, like on average on each episode, and the credits are 15 minutes long because of their Los Angeles, Georgia, and New York units that are all there, that are fully staffed, and they're 900 people doing special effects that are like, I gotta make sure the light reflecting off Vision's cape is good. That's my only job, and I get paid.
Christian, while you're talking about the budget, I want to point out that every single scene with Paul Bettany as the Vision, not his human self in it, is a VFX shot. Because the way the costume is made, they finally got rid of his ear cups to make it more comfortable for him. So they literally have to create the ear covers for him on his cowl in every scene that he's in. So like every time you see just the Vision, that's a VFX shot because of how they're manipulating his face. So I think
it looks great too.
That's part of the reason why.
Honestly.
And we can talk about more of the reason why, but that's part of the reason why the budget of this show is so high.
That's the really scrappy indie filmmaking spirit I love of this show. One of the main celebrity actors was uncomfortable, so they had to hire 60 nerds to program.
Can you make Vision's left ear cup? We'll give you I don't know, $5,000 an hour. I don't fucking know what's money.
I find that the show it's at that level where it is so good. There are so many good things about it that at the end of the day, it's a little frustrating. And it's frustrating that in some ways it's really rewarding to being invested in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is great. As someone who's seen all these movies, and we've reviewed them several times, I've seen multiple movies, and some of them are some of my favorite movies to revisit, much like a warm blanket, like a nice warm blanket of a sitcom.
Really warms your blankets.
It really does. And some of that's good, but then you get the bad parts of it, which are like things that aren't essential to the story that are thrown in. This is a common complaint among these type of long-running things where you're like, this is like, but it's very comic booky, right? They just want to sell you another issue, right? They want you to stay invested in the universe and what's going on. And some of that stuff I do find interesting. I find some of it distracting for the universe at large. So at the end of the day, I mean, some of it is so well done. It is appalling when stuff is just stupid shit. Stupid written, and that's why when you're like, it's the best written thing. No, there are some of the best written stuff is in this show, but there is real trash writing. So I don't find that it's very consistent, and I was overall satisfied. I do recommend it, especially if you're a fan of the MCU. I think anyone, the great thing about these is it's super broad. Anybody coming to the show is going to find something to like if you stick with it long enough. I truly believe that, and on that level, it's very, very successful. It only makes me
put it. Sorry, continue.
No, please go ahead.
To put your comment into perspective, or at least to put my comments into perspective, when I say it's some of the best written content I've ever seen in the MCU, in my brain, I'm literally only thinking about the Wanda and Vision sequences. So now that you've mentioned this other half of the show that I love, I see where you're coming from. Because, like I said, I only picture those sequences when I'm referring to some of the best writing in the MCU.
Sure.
And I think those sequences absolutely deserve that title because of how emotionally resonant they are.
Chris, the other parts that I'm talking about are also in the show.
They are, and I kind of forget about that sometimes. I'm not going to lie. But because the other moments are so impactful.
Yeah, this is true. No, I can totally understand that, and I can totally get behind, and we'll nerd out about all the good stuff that's in it. But I will just say, it is one of those things that surprisingly, it was better than I thought it would be. Because my expectations were similarly low for what they were going to do with the TV stuff, and it was getting good enough at some points that it ultimately became more frustrating when it was like, wow, I know the talent to do this is there, and the effort to make it possibly more broad or more quote unquote MCU kind of hurts a lot of the stuff they're going for, which is a little sad, but it's a good show. It's Disney shit. It's good.
It's the best written show. I agree.
Any final thoughts before we go into spoilers? Also, for the listeners that are leaving now to go watch WandaVision, enjoy it. Let us know what you think. Email us at popbox@gmail.com. All that shit. Let's get into spoilers. I'm done with this, right? Careful for spoilers. Trademark copyrighted. Interesting.
Not by us.
All right. So let's talk about the themes of WandaVision. Who wants to go first? I'll leave this open. Who's really excited about themes?
I can go if you
go for it.
Let's just jump right in.
I'll probably go last because most of my themes revolve around Ralph Bohner.
I'm so excited to hear about those.
That sounds exciting. Wow.
Deep implications there.
He really is the most important character in this show. So I can see 100% why most of the themes that you drew from this show were about him.
Well, Ralph Bohner stands tall where others slouch. Am I right?
Undeniable.
No, giant among men.
WandaVision, excluding Ralph Bohner, at its core is a show about grief and trauma and the acceptance of these things that we experience over the course of our lives. And through Wanda, this character that we've seen in the MCU, who has literally experienced nothing but grief and trauma from what we've seen. Her parents were killed in a bombing when she was 10. Her brother was shot to death in the street by Ultron. And then the love of her life was murdered by Thanos. She literally cannot catch a break. And then we have Tony Stark, who after the snap had a lovely wife and a little 5-year-old girl and was living in a cabin in the woods. The antithesis of what she's experienced in life. But WandaVision is the exploration of this grief and trauma and how we as humans cope with that. The lies that we're kind of willing to tell ourselves at times to not face these things. Because I think, both Kristen and James spoke earlier in the episode about turning to sitcoms in lower moments, and I've done that as well in my life. In college, probably close to around the same time Christian was. I think we all experience that at some point in our lives, where we reach out to content to try and hide from the reality of things. And that's exactly what Wanda's doing in this show. But over the course of the show, we get to kind of follow her on this emotional journey. And by the end, maybe it wasn't delivered as effectively as I would have wanted it to be. But I will say that by the end, she has come to terms with what she has experienced in her past and learned to accept this grief and make it a part of her. And like I mentioned on Villains last Friday, I think this show is super timely and hugely important to what we've just experienced as a global society in the year 2020. And that's why I loved it so much.
By experiencing something in global society, you're talking about the Tomato Town Fortnite song, right?
Yeah.
It's all collectively hearing that song. Clearly, you guys aren't TikTokers.
I'm definitely not talking about. I'm definitely not talking about like this little thing that happened last year and still taking place. We're going through a bit of a pandemic,
the
guys.
Snyder cut. Oh
yes, the Snyder cut pandemic.
All right, James. What were your takeaways from the themes?
I mean, I pretty much just have to echo what Chris said. Like, this is a show about grief, trauma, and selfishness, honestly, because there are moments where Wanda sees what she's actually doing to these people and she locks that part of herself away to pretty much like preserve her own happiness. So watching that being explored, because she is supposed to be a superhero, she's supposed to be someone that saves other people. But I love that this show, and this is what the MCU has done in general, but I love that this show shows that heroes are also human beings too. They have low moments. They all go through the same types of emotions as we do. It's just extra because of the powers that they have. Like Monica alludes to, at the end of the finale when she tells Wanda, like, I probably would have done the exact same thing as you if I had your abilities. I lost my mom to cancer and I wasn't even around for her final moments. Like, who knows what I would do? So just watching that exploration of what someone with Wanda's abilities can do, I loved it. So those are definitely the themes that I took away from it.
What about the themes with Sword? I want to know what the theme of Sword is in Hayward. What's going on there, James? What's the show trying to tell us with Sword?
I think we have to wait until Secret Invasion to actually get more of what the real Sword is like.
More to come.
I mean, just to the point of Sword, there's a little bit of governments only looking at things as how they can be weaponized. There's definitely kind of a theme there with the Vision and how they're reanimating him and for what purpose.
Which wasn't
that's the thing. Like, I wouldn't even
or Winter Soldier or any of the stuff with S.H.I.E.L.D.
I'm just saying it is there.
But it goes to add up. It shows that Sword is just like any type of government lapdog that they just want to find this weapon. Because even Hayward said it, I think, in episode 3, when he said that, she has vision, and we have no heroes because of Thanos, what happened and everything. You don't know what has happened within those 5 years because of the blip. So he felt like, the government felt like they're weak and they want more weaponized synthezoid weapons. And he feels like he wants to be a big dog.
To me, that's all on Hayward, man. Like, I don't feel like if Monica's mother was in charge, she would have taken that route as completely disregarding Vision's last wishes. I don't think she would have done that. I also don't think Monica would have done that. Nick Fury wouldn't have done that. So
Monica's
I think that's
pushing
just
back immediately.
I think that's just a Hayward thing. I can't just put that all on Sword, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely got the theme of like secret, underground, deep state kind of thing. And they're actually all lizard people.
More of them might be lizard people than you think.
Yep.
Vash, what did you take away from themes of WandaVision?
My favorite part is about Vision questioning himself, is if he's the real Vision, what is he, like that, like Chris mentioned last week on Friday on Villains, is that, he didn't feel like he just went to college and just got his bachelor's degree. about philosophy for no reason, because
I felt justified in my choices.
No, but it felt like for me when I went to my college and I took classes for it as well. I was like, why am I taking classes for this stupid ass reason when I don't even need this for my degree? But then, hey, it felt useful because I actually studied this textbook for a reason, and I love it because that was my favorite aspect of Wanda and Vision finding out what it is to be human, what it is to grieve, what it is to feel human, like wondering, well, why are we put on this earth? Why are we put in this planet? For what reason? Is it just to get a job and get a woman pregnant, or get us pregnant and everything, and then just after that die and then just repeat the cycle? Like, that type of ideology was very interesting for me. Yes, Sword wasn't strong enough as an antagonist or not, but the writing, best writing of the MCU of this type of series is very fascinating in the way it is showed for us as the audience, where we can actually relate to these characters, where before Wanda and Vision in Ultron and the other films, we were just there. Now here we actually can relate to their thought process, to their actual layers of characters, not just, oh, right here's a character, let's relate to them. For me, WandaVision filled this type of purpose for us to relate to them, and I actually love that very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely very, very relatable, especially Vision and Wanda's relationship. I think that's some of the best stuff. Brian.
Yeah, so definitely agree with everything you guys have said so far. Kind of piggybacking off what you were saying, Vash, the idea of how we form our identity. And I feel like they kind of, from Wanda's perspective, she's fighting against her memories to form this new thing, and ultimately does some heinous and atrocious things to the people around her to hold up this false narrative. And Vision is coming to terms with the fact that he's not really Vision without the memories of Vision. And that is what makes him him. And the fact that both of them are coming to that same realization, I think thematically is the strongest part of the show. And coming together with the two Visions together and the Ship of Theseus discussion, that was absolutely incredible, and I think is definitely, from a writing perspective, my favorite moment of the series.
Mine too.
Nice.
Aside from that, I really appreciate the kind of dark underbelly of sitcoms, forcing us to acknowledge the inherent fakeness of it all, and to ridiculous levels of meta stuff. But I really liked playing around with that. I know everyone's calling it Lynchian, but I think that element is very much Lynchian, like what's hiding behind the picket fence, perfect house kind of thing. So I had a lot of fun with that as well.
Yeah, you guys nailed all of it. I mean, that's really all the show is about, which is part of my frustrations, is that the grief stuff and the identity stuff is there. I think, obviously, Wanda's grief and how she's coping with it, with this sitcom reality she's made. Yeah, that's the strongest stuff, right? And she ultimately has to give up those memories and cherish them. And, there's lots of great writing around that. And that's all there. But the supporting stuff, as far as Vision's identity crisis, we get the Theseus thing, and it only kind of like hints at, we made a mistake by reading Tom King's The Vision. Shout out to that, because that has a way better cohesive story with way better writing. Sorry. But so that's like, it's there, but it's not super there. And you kind of wish that this stuff with Vision was introduced maybe earlier in the show so it could grow and maturate maybe a little more. And again, I don't know what the hell, like, Monica Rambeau and Sword have to do with this other than, they're bad and she's good and she's trying to help Wanda, and they're just trying to use it for military gain. It's just
kind of her origin story, right? I can't remember.
Right.
This was her origin story to get her mutant transformation of her genes because of her going through the hex 3 times. But the reason for Sword is more of an Easter or build-up from how S.H.I.E.L.D. get the build-up and then got destroyed because of Hydra and everything back in Captain America Winter Soldier. Sword is getting built up now because they will play an important key in the future films of Captain Marvel and the other stuff that's going to happen with Phase 5.
No, I get the utility of it, but what is Monica Rambeau's motivation for helping Wanda? She just believes in her, right? She, from the minute she comes in, she has no doubt. She goes, "It's all Wanda. Oh, Wanda's hurt. I'm gonna help."
I mean, she's a human being. She's not some government slave. She sees a person that's grieving instead of a nuclear weapon, and that's the difference between Monica and Hayward. Hayward just sees a gun. Whether Monica sees that this person is just grieving, if we can get through to Wanda, this is how we can end everything. This is what we need our heroes to be. They can't just see good and evil. They have to be able to look at people for who they really are and make judgments based off of that.
I just wanted to compare why, Vision and Wanda's relationship and her grief is working, and Monica Rambeau and Hayward isn't.
Let me say this.
But the Monica is because Monica just came back from the blip, and her mom was dead 2 years prior, but she didn't know that, so she didn't really have time to grieve. She just got told and then got back to the job, so she never really had time to grieve about her mom. She never knew what was going to happen because of the blip, so she just got back and she understood about Wanda in her place, because she understood, like she said at the end of the episode, like, if I had your power, if I had in your shoes, I would have done the same thing to see my mom.
Yeah, Vash is absolutely right. Monica, within the narrative of the show, is supposed to be a counterpoint, a foil to Wanda. They're both experiencing grief. They're both experiencing the loss of loved ones. However, they're handling it differently. Monica has already embraced it and has realized that the grief is just going to be a part of her for the rest of her life. And there are going to be good days and there are going to be bad days. And that's why, at least in terms of the narrative of the show, Monica is a little bit of a stronger character, or at least she got to the end point faster. I don't want to say she's a stronger person, but she got to that realization a little bit faster than Wanda did. Now, in terms of the rest of the sword stuff, we still have to remember, while there are some great moments in the show, this is still a show that takes place within the MCU. And we know from the way that fans reacted to the first 3 episodes of the show, not everybody was on board for the sitcom homages. In fact, it turned a lot of people off to the rest of the show. I've heard of a lot of people that completely gave up on the show, having just watched the first 2 or first 3 episodes. So I see where you're coming from, Christian, that the sword stuff is the weaker stuff, but the sword stuff is there because that's the MCU stuff that Marvel Studios, it's a requirement.
Doesn't mean it has to be bad. Yeah, but it doesn't mean it has to be bad.
And I agree with you. I know it doesn't have to be bad, but what I'm saying is, like, it's there because it's the requirement. It's still a superhero show. It still has to tie into the MCU. And
they have to build up for other stuff.
Right.
Jimmy Woo and Darcy Lewis are really high points of the show for me. I think
they're a lot of fun. Yeah.
And Monica as well, right? I think there's a lot of good stuff happening outside, but to your point, Christian, I think it does feel kind of generic and samey a little bit in the more MCU elements, for sure.
There's really no reason why you would call it sword. It's just S.H.I.E.L.D. doing the same thing S.H.I.E.L.D. did, the same, and the whole scrolls underneath
it's a badass
sword are the
acronym,
same
to be
as
fair. But
the reason it ties back to the comics, Christian. The reason it's sword is because sword is essentially the agency within the government that deals with, just like Vash said, the cosmic
literally so they could point
stuff.
Upward at the end and we'd know who they're talking about.
No, I understand. I get that. So I will admit, I think it's a great point that Monica Rambeau is a great counterweight to what Wanda's going through. However, to say that she is at a different point in totally going that direction, I don't know. She gets to the end of the show, sees Wanda, goes, girl, I would have done the same thing if I had cosmic power. She's like, I would have done the exact same thing if I had your powers and I was going through the grief phase.
I don't know if we can take that literally, though. I think she might just be trying to comfort Wanda in that moment. Saying like,
and trying to relate as well.
Basically, it's akin to just telling somebody like, I understand. No, it's akin to telling someone who's going through something that you have gone through in the past. I understand where you're coming from.
No,
so I don't think she literally would have controlled the whole town. She's just trying to align with Wanda in that moment and let her know, like, despite what she's done, she understands where these actions came from because of what she's gone through as well.
There's just so much depth in the developing relationship between Wanda and Vision, what Wanda's going through, what influenced this, where she's going as a character, what she's going through, Vision, his identity coming to terms. I think that could have been stronger in the second half of the season, but still, it's very good. And then you have Monica Rambeau, who's like, I have to protect Wanda, and Hayward, who's like, Vision's a weapon. I want Vision. I want weapons. And that's it. That's all that dynamic is. And please tell me if there's anything more elaborate that's happening there. But Hayward
I see exactly where you're coming from, but to me, I can't look at it that way because like what Chris already said, it's because of the way that it has to fit into the greater MCU. Like Chris said, it's a requirement, if you will, right? Like there's several things in Age of Ultron that kind of just happen because it needs to set up something else later on in the universe. WandaVision is gearing us up for the confrontation between Monica and Captain Marvel. It's also setting us up for Jimmy Woo's next appearance in Quantumanium. It's giving us stuff that we're going to see in Spider-Man 3, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. It's also kind of the starting point of introducing us to the multiverse itself. So I definitely get where you're coming from, but I'm easier on it because I know that it has all of that weight on top of it. And all of that sword stuff, we're going to get so much sword stuff in Secret Invasion. That's an entire series just on the sword stuff. It's going to be great getting to see Monica in Captain Marvel 2 as Photon against Captain Marvel or however that's going to go. Like it's all leading into something greater. So I can give it a pass for that, but I get where you're coming from.
Right. And I think the SHIELD narrative, I think, even got better in like Age of Ultron and Winter Soldier. Like that stuff developed better. Right. And so I'm not going to say that there isn't hope. The SHIELD stuff was so shallow in the first phase of the MCU. Right. It was, but it never was an integral. I'll say where they did better in that first phase is that sword was always the little bonus thing. Like it was sword came in, was like plot device. And that was it, right? They didn't actually try to make anything more of it. Whereas this tries to put weight on Hayward as a villain, and I think it succumbs to that weight. And I think you saying, oh, it has to be shitty because it's part of this great thing that's going to be great is settling.
We didn't say it has to be shitty.
I didn't think it was shitty at all.
I think that's putting words in our mouths. I also didn't think it was as heinous as you're kind of making it out to be. But
it was fine.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
Hayward was a means to an end. He was only acting director. It was always in my mind that he was going to be removed eventually. Yeah. So to me, I never put any value into what Hayward was going to bring to the show or the greater MCU. He's a means to an end.
Yeah, just somebody to be placed in Monica's way.
Just a disposable character made to be written off. That's all I'm saying is that like I was hoping for more motive. Like I was like, oh, what's Hayward up to? And it was
we
just
have
like,
to acknowledge this though,
bad.
man. Like Hayward's not the main antagonist of the show.
That's what
Agatha Harkness is.
He's bad.
Yeah. To Chris's point, right? He's not the main antagonist. Sword is not meant to be the antagonist. The antagonist of the show is Agatha Harkness.
Technically, Wanda. Technically.
I mean,
in a way, yes, definitely. But Hayward, he's just this ancillary character that's just there to be an opposition for Monica.
And I mean,
temporary
the
director.
For an ancillary character, Hayward has a lot of screen time.
But if you also think about it, this is a sitcom and also playing with tropes of the 70s and 80s. Hayward was playing the trope of the bad military guy in the forces where they see what is not black or white. They don't try to see the gray. So they saw Wanda as a weapon. All right, we gotta get her out. We gotta kill the kids. He just put a whole 6 bullet of a gun at the kids with no problem. He had no type of remorse. So I felt it like, okay, we were playing these type of tropes, these type of sitcom in the show. He was playing his own trope of his own character of this show. That's why for me, it didn't really affect me much of how Hayward was, because throughout the whole time we reviewed week to week, I call him a dickwad because that's what he was, and he played that trope very well done.
Yeah, and to Vash's point,
but he wasn't in the fake reality, and he's not played for comic. Like he's not played comically tropey. But anyway,
in terms of his actions though in the show, we're informed very early on in the show that surviving the blip for him was difficult. And he's been kind of turned off of superpowered beings for that reason. And that's why he's so obsessed with like the weaponization of these superpowers against them. He's completely anti-metahuman. And those words are never spoken, but through his conversations with Monica, we learn that it was more difficult for him surviving the blip than it was, he believes, for people who got blipped away. and that's his motivation. You know, that
he was turned
and
off.
That
he's
even
turned
kind of
off by
explains why he has no
superheroes.
problem shooting at the kids in the last episode, which is a completely atrocious moment, by the way, an adult open firing on children. But like in his eyes, they have superpowers, so they're lesser. You know, that's just the way he views those people.
And plus, at his eyes, he felt like he's being the hero for the town because Wanda and the kids are the one that's causing this as the hex. So for the town, he seems as the hero. So we also have to see it. The show is showing us as him as antagonist, but we see it as the flip side. Wanda's the antagonist, and he's technically the hero because he's trying to save the town from being back to the normal lives.
I think he's only turned off by superheroes because he didn't see Wanda in her Scarlet Witch outfit. Ralph Bohner! Bang, bang, bang! Yikes.
Wow. Transition, that's what you
Can't
call
wait
it.
to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, because this can't go beyond 2 hours and 15 minutes or I'll get made fun of for making fun of your show. That's okay. All the sword stuff we talked about was completely necessary to the podcast. Let's talk about on a higher note for me especially. And I'm coming off more combative just because someone has to disagree on the show. But let's lighten things up. Let's talk about our favorite episodes. Chris, let's start with you. What was your favorite episode of WandaVision?
So my favorite episode, unquestionably, was episode 8, Previously On. And the reason why I love this episode so much is because it really does tackle all the themes that we just talked about. We get to watch Wanda go through her grief in real time. You know, through the help of Agatha, who's taking her back in time to re-experience these moments that brought her to this breaking point. And I think this is the strongest episode of the entire show for that reason. Also, on a nerdier note, I'm an absolute sucker for world building and lore. You guys know that. And this episode gave us a lot of that. So, yeah, this is undoubtedly my favorite episode of the entire show. There were excellent moments in other episodes. Especially, I mentioned on Villains last Friday that the finale of this show had some of my favorite moments in the MCU in its entirety. But episode 8 was absolutely a standout episode for me over all the 9 episodes.
Title of this episode of Popaholics will be titled Irrational Hyperbole. Vash, what was your favorite episode?
It's a tie between episode 7 and 8, which is Breaking the Fourth Wall and Previously On. Because the Breaking the Fourth Wall, one of my favorite characters from the Marvel Comics is our boy Deadpool. And the way he speaks and the way Wanda spoke against the Fourth Wall and the way she's trying to figure out, like, she said, I'll just have a day of the Mondays. So I feel like a lot of people can relate to that because people get excited for the weekends and then we get back to Monday, like, okay, back to our 9-to-5 jobs. But then, like, most people can understand, like, we just try to get on with our day. We just try to do our best, and we don't want to get out of our bed. It's like in the whole beginning of the episode, she did not want to take care of the kids. Like most parents, just like, I just want a day off. But when you're a parent, you never get a day off. So like a lot of people could understand that in that type of retrospect. But also what Chris said, episode 8, love the Lord, because we also like knew Wanda has mutant powers in the comics, but in the MCU, it was like, the Mind Stone gave her powers, sure, or technically the whole Tesseract. But within episode 8, we actually understood her as a character. We got more layers of her as a character, and we actually understood why she liked the sitcoms, or why she was so broken that. Or what the Joker has said before in the comics, like, it just takes one bad day. Yeah. Nah, for this girl, it just took one bad life. So, like, this girl never got a break. So I really felt bad for her very much. So it's a tie between those 2 episodes.
The Joker was in WandaVision? It was a very special episode.
I don't know, if you pause the intro sequence of episode 4 at the right moment, you can see the Joker cackling at Batman under the stairwell of Wanda and Vision's house.
Which
and
of course
also true.
Is a tribute to issue number 97 of the Great Wonder Man.
And also, if you saw the post-credit of episode 8, like the post-credit after the long credits, right there pops the Joker right there just laughing right there as well.
Can I just say the excessive post-credits on the back half of the season made me feel like I missed stuff earlier. I was like, do I need to go back? Were there post-credit scenes that I missed?
Dude, I scrubbed on first viewing, even from the very first episode, I scrubbed through the credits just to make sure I didn't miss any post-credit stuff.
Chris, when I
that it was
imagined
a
you,
Marvel Studios thing.
Yeah.
when you were like, "Oh, I'm rewatching the X episode," I just always imagined you with a magnifying glass right up to the TV.
You'd be pretty close. Yeah, I was like, I would turn closed captioning on. Sometimes I would turn like the audio description on, especially once we got the Evan Peters episode. Yeah, you're not far off, Christian.
Yeah,
Brian,
I'm one of those weirdos that likes to watch the credits. Like I just love seeing all of the people that worked extremely hard on projects. Like I'm the annoying person where the movie theater staff is trying to clean the theater and I'm still in there watching the credits.
You should watch the credits though. Everybody should.
You should, because me now working production, if I see my name up there, I'm gonna be waiting until I see my name. Oh, right there! I see hey, I work on that. That's me. So you better be seeing those credits, because those people put their damn hours from New York, Los Angeles, and Georgia. They be putting those hours to make sure they look good.
Todd Lester, you production assistant. Wow, I could tell that Elizabeth Olsen was highly caffeinated on a very special episode, and it was because of you, bud.
We appreciate you.
We appreciate you.
You get a bonus.
I stand up in the theater and I salute you. Brian, what was your favorite episode?
So I'm going to mix it up. My favorite was episode 6, All New Halloween Spooktacular. So Evan Peters was definitely one of my favorite parts of the show. I thought he brought incredible comic relief, but also that great creepiness where there's so much implication in everything that he's saying, sometimes explicit.
It's the implication, Brian.
So they are
Please,
in danger.
let's not go there. Jesus.
No. Nobody's in danger, Chris. It's the implication of danger.
Speaking of ridiculous sitcoms, Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yeah, terrible people. Right. But it also took the creepiness level just up to 11. Even though we find out that Agatha was acting during it, that moment and what Vision is going through, recognizing that he's dead, kind of coming to terms with the situation in a way that he hadn't before, as well as seeing the outskirts of the town. People just can't move. The children are locked in their rooms. It's just very, very dark. And I was not expecting the MCU to take it there, and it did. So yeah, I think that episode 6 was my strongest.
Yeah, very strong episode. James?
Man, so before we started, I had 3 choices.
You gotta pick one.
And then I decided. So
you had 9, James.
Because I think this show is just so good. One of my choices was episode 6. One of my choices was episode 8. But the one that I landed on as my favorite episode, it has to be episode 9, the finale. This episode made me feel like a little kid again, like reading comics and reading these storylines that I never thought in a million years would come to light. Watching Vision fighting White Vision in broad daylight in the middle of the city was absolutely amazing. Watching Wanda fight against Agatha was amazing. The reveal of the Darkhold, to me, for a comic book fan, that was one of the best moments in the MCU for me. Because the Darkhold is essentially a vessel for this demon named Chthon, who is the god of chaos, which is where Wanda's magic comes from. I was absolutely blown away by that moment. I absolutely loved it. The conversation between the different visions about the ship of Theseus, watching these godlike beings settle this dispute through this conversation was so captivating to me. I absolutely loved it. Watching Wiccan and Speed going up against the Sword Agents, that was awesome. Getting to see Tommy with the glasses on, this great homage to the goggles that he wears in the comics. Watching Wanda creating runes in the sky, absorbing all of Agatha's energy, becoming the Scarlet Witch, seeing the costume. I've been waiting to see the helmet on Wanda forever, and we finally got it. Like, this episode, I instantly watched it. As soon as the episode ended, I just restarted and watched it again because it was just so much fun to watch. Watching Monica be Photon. Like, I love what they've done with her character. It's this mixture of Spectrum and Photon. Watching her jump selflessly in front of bullets for these kids and her electromagnetic powers absorbing the energy from those bullets to stop them. As a comic book fan, again, I was losing my mind. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it right now. Just thinking about where White Vision is going off to now, when we're going to see him again. The end credit, the post-credit scene, watching Wanda reading from the Darkhold. That was absolutely insane. This is the Book of the Damned. This is all terrible magic. And just thinking about how this is going to lead into the multiverse of madness, all of that culmination, and especially the end, how incredibly sad the episode was, watching them having to say goodbye to their kids. That moment between Wanda and Vision, where they're standing there in the living room, that entire conversation.
Heartbreaking.
Absolutely heartbreaking. And
so
then
did you get a Ralph Bohner?
Definitely a nerd one for sure. And then just watching Wanda standing in the middle of that house where everything began for her, where WandaVision began, and then watching her pull her hood up and just the walk of shame, essentially walking through all of these people that will hate her forever for robbing them of like 2 weeks of their lives, however much time it was.
I think it was like 9 or 10 days.
Yeah, something like that. Like, just watching these people judge her, because
all the characters who came out of it were like, "You're mind fucking me."
and then again with Monica, like Monica being visited by the Skrull, telling her that I'm here from a friend of your mom's, and points to the sky because we know that Nick Fury is on a sword ship in space somewhere. So it's just like, what does that lead to in Captain Marvel 2? So all of it coming together in this one episode is definitely my favorite episode of WandaVision.
You know, James, I've said this before when you've been on the show, but I think I just have to restate it. And I don't know how many more times I will restate it over the course of our friendship, but your passion is so infectious. I cannot help but get hyped about everything that you talk about when you get super passionate about stuff. So that's why I love working with him.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah,
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you reminded me of the things. I think it's a really good finale. Half the things you really liked, I didn't know were things, so I'm really excited that you've put them into existence. You're like, we know Nick Fury's in the sky. I was like, did we? I didn't. Is he?
Dude, from Spider-Man Far From Home told us that. In the end credits sequence, Nick Fury's in the spaceship with all the Skrulls.
Oh, I totally forgot. Only because there's 90 hours of this shit, Chris. Talking about the end credit scene of a movie I've seen once. You're like, no, because of the third post-credit sequence in the bad Spider-Man movie.
It was bad Spider-Man film? What?
Oh God, you guys are so jaded. That movie's not that good. No, sorry, I don't want to yuck your yum. I think you're right. I would say that's definitely in my top three. Is the season finale. Although a lot of people are disappointed because they got a little bit of disappointment in the Ralph Bohner. And I get that, but I mostly enjoyed it. And I enjoyed, actually, some people were like, oh, the special effects, like the fight scenes weren't cool. The Vision on Vision, like phasing through each other's
Epic,
shit,
dude.
It was the coolest Vision shit we've gotten for sure. Like, because
period.
People forget how broken he is in the comics.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Like, when they're having the movie, I'm like, people don't understand. Like, Vision is one of the most strongest, powerful character, and they just have him in the back, just chilling, not using it. It's just the same thing when it's Martian Manhunter in the comics of DC on the movies.
Yeah,
like, nobody uses it, but he could rival Superman, Wonder Woman, and other characters
easily.
And when Vision finally in this fight, it shows how they both just going through each other and everything, just having a whole type of 69 going around each other. I'm like, oh damn, yeah, going in. Okay, cool,
dude. When they're grappling and phasing through each other, it's so fucking cool. Like,
right? Can I talk about the Ralph Bohner thing like super quick? Like, the reason why, like, it bugged me for like 2 seconds, but then it didn't, because it's like, dude, just think about how cool this is. This proves And we already know the multiverse of madness is coming, but this proves that the multiverse exists. This dude is just one version in the vast multiverse of this character. So in another universe where the X-Men exists, he's Quicksilver in that universe. When you think about it that way, it's so cool. So it's like, it's fine that it's disappointing that Agatha or Wanda didn't like pull him from another universe, but it just proves like there's a version of you in every universe, and in this one, that's the character. I was okay with that.
James just hit it on the dot.
Jet Li.
But the thing is, James just hit on the dot because of how a lot of scientists say that there's a twin version of you in somewhere around the universe, somewhere around the planet. But also some other scientists say that there's a version of you in a different universe that you're probably like a millionaire, and that you're probably Chinese, like in a whole different type of way. And what James just hit on the dot, like in this other universe, aka the X-Men universe, he's Quicksilver. Will he come back? Who knows? So hopefully they do and play around with that. But I wasn't disappointed. I was let down, but at the same time, it's called fan theories. I'm not the one that's writing the show. I'm not the one that's headlining what MCU Kevin Feige is trying to lead into. And maybe he knew this was going to be the outcome, but maybe he has something in store for us. He's a person that also knows what the fans want. He also knows what it would be good for marketing and money. This was probably something they want to do and lead into. Maybe we'll be more down the line for.
Vash, I have it on good authority that this is the only version of the multiverse where you aren't a Chinese millionaire.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I did not want to be a homeless type of Iron Fist out here.
Oh, jeez. But I'm Danny Rand.
And lose every single fight, even though you're the master of Changlong, which makes no total sense. Why
does Iron Fist keep coming up in these conversations? Can we let him go, for the love of God? Never again.
Here's what you should have done, James. It just not watched Iron Fist. Tell you it's a good side of the aisle to be on. I think I watched a couple episodes and I was like, this is bad. This is not good.
It's
You're not wrong.
Yeah. Real briefly, I did want to touch on, we talked about Vision, and that last scene with Vision fighting is so cool because honestly, as someone who wasn't a fan of the comic books and didn't know who the character of Vision was until he was introduced in Age of Ultron and saw him subsequently in other films, it wasn't until after Civil War, which when I talked to Chris and said like, hey Chris, I gotta be honest, I don't know what Vision's powers are. And he's like, I don't blame you because the movies don't really describe it.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, it's like they do such a terrible job, and this episode of the show, I think, really, and the whole series as a whole, really exemplified his density changing properties. Which is cool. And I loved all the computer jokes. I saw a really funny meme that was him looking at Paul Bettany he's at like the office, the fake office in the sitcom, and it's like the hardest like question he has to answer, and he's looking at a computer, and on the computer it's a reCAPTCHA that says, "Are you a robot?" With it.
It's so good. It's such a funny.
I'm not a robot. Checkmark.
So perfect.
But my favorite episode, I'm shocked. We all seem to have different episodes, which I think is the mark of a really good show.
Good job, guys.
My favorite episode, is episode 4, and that is titled. I had it pulled up. We interrupt this program, and the reason it's my favorite episode is it shows, I think, all of the potential of the two realities mixing and what we're going to do in it. I think it introduces Sword and those characters and reintroduces Agent Wu like really strongly before they have a chance to ruin what that could be. So I was like, this was the highest. This was me at the top of the roller coaster of like, oh, they're doing it. Like
this sword stuff's gonna be awesome.
Sword. Oh, I hope it's better than Shield. That shit was kind of bullshit for half the MCU. It's a sword. That's way cooler than a shield. So it was kind of the top of the roller coaster for me. It was like, oh, they really are showing this like reality thing. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe I have the wrong episode, but at the end of this episode is the scene where Sword leads Wanda out for like a second of the Hex, and they all have their guns on her. Is that the end of this episode?
Oh my goodness.
I think that might come later because I think this ends at the same place the previous episode ends with.
It's episode 5 that happens.
5,
because the boys are already 10 in that episode. So it's in the 80s episode.
And rest in peace, Sparky as well.
Okay, well, that kind of hurts episode 4 for me. So maybe mine's my memory of episode 4, which is probably episode 4 and 5 together.
Is episode 4 the one where we start off in the past and get the
where
coming
everyone's
back?
getting rematerialized
That was one of my
from the blip.
favorite moments.
Yeah, and we finally get like the horrific blip, re-blippening,
Yes.
or I guess it's the blip is when they came back, the snaps when they went away, right?
I think it's all called the blip.
Yeah,
I think
it's
like
all
the period of time.
You can
is
call
like-
it either one.
That's how they've defined it within the universe, at least.
unsnapping.
Yes.
So I appreciated that perspective. I was like, oh my god, we're a media res. Everybody's coming back, and it was like kind of a horror scene. I thought that was like extremely well done. And then it ends with her being like, with Monica being like shot out of the dimension. That's such a cool shot. That's super solid. But yeah, I think I'm gonna mention the end of an episode that isn't my favorite, but I thought was.
Christian's gonna have to boot himself out of the Skype call.
One of my favorite scenes is when Wanda comes out and she's pissed. Like, this is the reality I created. I am a grieving woman. Don't fuck with me. And this is when you're like, Wanda is behind all of this. And she comes out and I remember seeing they all have those green lasers, and I thought of like at Alien vs Predator, because they had all those like infrared lasers that you could see, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of over the top, but man, it always looks so badass. And then she minds them all to flip them around, and I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Right? Oh my god.
And she is like full don't fuck with me. And yeah, that was one of my favorite, it is not favorite episode, but favorite moments of the show, where like pissed Wanda is a scary thing. I think if they do in the future where she is the villain, she will be like a Loki level villain, because we're so invested in her and know her backstory. And I think it could be very cool to see her as the primary antagonist in a future movie.
And I do think that's the direction they're moving in.
Terrifying.
Oh yeah.
Grieving Wanda, hell hath no fury, like a woman scorned. Also, just side note, and I'll mention this again, that Scarlet Witch outfit.
My God.
It's great.
I'm ordering one for my girlfriend.
Hell yeah, bro.
Hell yeah, bro.
She is
fucking fist bump,
beautiful.
dude. Yeah, bro.
Dude, I feel like if by October people are going out for Halloween again, we're gonna see
I'll
so
be
many
spending
chicks.
my money on a promising young woman first.
There it is. It had to come back this episode. Yep, there it is. We're gonna see so many women dressed as the Scarlet Witch this Halloween if we're actually able to like go out and party. It's gonna be like the Harley Quinn year, where like every woman's just dressed as Scarlet Witch.
And then a lot of guys will be dressing as Ralph Bohner at night.
Dude, the suit is perfect.
That's an easy
right?
costume, bro.
Because it's not as revealing as her comic book costume, but it's so fitting, and her curves come out so much in that costume. She looks fucking amazing.
Welcome to the Ralph Bohner cast. Yeah, I actually liked it because it didn't seem overly sexualized, and that was kind of hot.
It didn't.
You know, I came from a very conservative household. Okay, so
And-
I like to cover up a bit more.
You're like, just show me a little
And
kneecap.
plus-
That's all I
Yeah.
do.
Did you
I
see?
like the
dude,
added
I saw
hood.
ankle bone.
The hood was nice. And plus, the hood was nice. It was a nice addition to the
It was
costume,
cool.
because before she don't really have hood in the comics, but for this one was really a nice addition.
it's
for
more fitting. Witches have cloaks,
Yeah,
right?
it definitely
So
adds
it's
to
so
that witchy
fitting.
vibe. I
it
really
works
dig
so
it.
perfectly for her.
What do you guys think about Ralph Bohner? Is he hoodless?
Oh no,
Jeez.
gross, bro.
Okay. What is our least? Moving on. That was our favorite moments and episodes. What was our least? Some of our least favorite moments. We'll keep the floor open.
All right, so I want to go first. I would say Hayward. It was my least favorite. Like, yes, as much as I could, like, give, like, hey, you know, the letdown, the trope of what it is, but he was still an antagonist, and I wish he could have been better. I don't know if it was a script for him or he didn't do his best job as an actor. What could it be? But I felt like the sword stuff was good, but I feel like he could have had a better type of direction, not playing the trope all the time. I feel like he could have had a better reason. And if you want to save the type of town and everything, but he had to lie. Oh, she stole Vision. Like, no, you're a goddamn liar. You had Vision the whole time. You just want her. You just want to use her to bring back the real Vision, so you could just have him as your own pet dog as a weapon. So like, that's the only thing that I could say was a letdown. Because other than that, the show's a great, best version of the MCU.
Yes, they should have made Hayward. What's the word I'm looking for? Interesting. Any other least favorite moments?
I have to say, we have talked about Ralph Bohner a lot already, but one of the most fun aspects of this show was the community that it built up over the course of the 9 weeks, and getting to theorize with people, especially James and Vash over on Villains, and just hearing everybody's ideas and all this like crowdsourcing to pull Easter eggs. Like, the way puzzle box narratives build community is one of the best parts of a puzzle box narrative, right? And the episode where Evan Peters appeared for the first time at Wanda's front door, like, really opened up a whole can of worms in terms of theorizing about the multiverse. And when I watched the finale for the first time, and it was revealed that Evan Peters was like actually just kind of an out-of-work actor named Ralph Bohner living in Westview, and I laughed at the name because I'm a man-child, but I was still like, really? Like, this is... my initial reaction was like, this feels kind of disrespectful, but then that faded quickly. I have to admit, like, that feeling didn't last long, but we had invested so much time into trying to figure out where that Quicksilver was coming from, that it did feel a little egregious in my mind. But I have to say, and Vash mentioned it earlier, like, theorizing is the fun part, right? Like, if we are choosing to be a part of leak culture, then we have to accept the fact that not all the leaks are going to be correct. We can't get tied down to one specific leak in particular, because that will absolutely only lead to disappointment. So, like, once I kind of took a step back and was like, the journey was the best part of this whole character, right? Speculating about where this Quicksilver came from. And yes, he literally had nothing to do with any of the theories that we created about him. But that's fucking funny. You have to admit, like, it really, I think that, and I talked about this a little bit last Friday on Villains, but I definitely think that when Jac Schaeffer and Matt Shakman sat down and came up with that, they didn't think that it was going to come across the way a lot of people took it. You know, they didn't think it was going to offend as many of the theorists in the writing room as it ended up doing, because I don't think, and this is kind of silly on their part for not thinking that this would happen, but I don't believe that they thought Evan Peters being in the show was going to create the amount of discussion that it actually ended up creating. So, you know, it's really not on them. You know, they were just trying to create a really stupid Bohner joke. And we spent a lot of time theorizing about it for 9 weeks.
And if I want to add, it was also playing homage to what happened with James' favorite movie of the MCU, Iron Man 3.
Yeah, it's definitely like a Trevor Slattery moment.
Yeah, so maybe they were playing homage to that as well. You know, another trope.
You know, that connects to two of my favorite moments, which is the introduction of Evan Peters' character and the Ralph Bohner. That to me is my favorite arc of the entire show, because Evan Peters being it was like, oh, all these possibilities are open, right? And I was a part of that, and I enjoyed being a part of that discussion. But when it was revealed that his name was Ralph Bohner, I had watched this remotely with my girlfriend. If I was not stuck in this, like, if I pause it, it's going to mess this whole evening up, trying to realign where we're at, I would have paused it because I was laughing so hard, because it was like, I just imagine the writers going like, we're going to introduce Evan Peters, right? People are going to lose their fucking mind. They're going to think the X-Men are coming because we just acquired Fox. It's going to be crazy. And then we reveal at the end, that he's a nobody and his name is Ralph Bohner. And I'm like, I want to high five those people, because it does, like, people are passionate. James, you're one of the most passionate nerd people I know. And I do think that you take things very well, and you don't get, like, personally attacked by these kinds of things often. So I respect you. What I don't respect is someone like who makes a story in their head and that it doesn't work, and then that's the reason it's bad. That's called stupidity, and like you should be a writer. That's
called the Star Wars fandom.
Yeah, you should be a writer, right? If you want things that you have written in your head to be true, then you should write them because that's how creative
the only
works.
way it'll ever work out.
If I don't like how a song goes and I'm like, I like this genre and this style, but I wish it was this way, I go and I write the fucking song that I wanted to hear. And then I listen to it and go, oh yeah, that's right. I'm fucking bad at it. And I respect good artists more because guess what? It's hard. And Ralph Bohner is fucking hard and he's fucking genius.
Dude, Ralph
he has a
Bohner,
men's cave.
Ralph Bohner has one of the most hilarious lines in the entire show, which is, "Are you a fan of Steven Seagal?"
Yes.
Yes.
Incredible.
Fucking cracked me up, man.
See, although as ridiculous as that scene is, because it's like, we need Monica Rambeau to not be in the show for like 20 minutes. So she's just in a room, I guess.
And then Peter's babysitting.
Yeah, exactly. But I loved it. It was my favorite. I was like, yes, it is kind of like, it's silly, it's dumb. And honestly, I was like, oh, that's also a reference to the fact that Leonardo DiCaprio's name on Growing Pains was Bohner. Like it's a reference to another sitcom. So
I didn't
even think of that.
That's excellent.
Wow.
yeah. So that's after I went Ralph Bohner. I then thought, oh, Bohner from Growing Pains.
Right.
So that was actually one of my top moments. I absolutely loved it.
Other
Brian,
than that, I really don't have any grievances with the show. I enjoyed a lot of it.
Brian, between military propaganda and other, what was your least favorite thing?
Honestly, I feel like just kind of elements of what happened with Agatha. I thought the initial reveal was great. But then her motivations after that, how it was explained, was just kind of, oh, she just wants Wanda's power. That's been the whole thing. I feel like I wish there was a little bit more there. But overall, yeah, I don't have any specific moments that really took me out of the show. Even the stuff with Hayward, because of Monica, Darcy, and Jimmy Woo, I was there for it. And I did like the misdirection that Hayward provides to make us think that Wanda had stolen Vision physically, and then we find out that like she created him out of nothing. And I thought that was a pretty good reveal and kind of a misdirect there, similar to the misdirect with Evan Peters and all the implications there. And they made a freaking kick-ass joke in there too.
Yeah.
They were just like
it.
rubbing it in, incredible. But yeah, there weren't any like moments that I really just hated.
Yeah, also finding out that the kids were actually dogs all along. I thought that was pretty incredible.
Everyone in the
Predicted
Hex
weeks ago.
was a dog all along. Confirmed by Erica.
It's pretty incredible. Yeah, Hayward is definitely a low point for me. And I've expressed that, and Vash, you've expressed that very well, even though you defended it for like an hour, and then you came on and said, Hayward sucked.
Well, out of the whole 9 episodes, that's the weakest string storyline, but that's out of 9 episodes of 30 minutes each. That's still good compared to, other 23 films like, Thor, The Dark World, Iron Man 3, and other 23 films, still better than those.
Oh,
Best written storyline.
I don't
do
know,
wanna
Mordecai
say-
or whatever his name might be a better villain than Hayward.
Malekith?
Mordecai. Yeah, Malekith.
Close enough.
I'm about to say, is that something Lord of the Rings, I think?
No.
Brian, you were saying?
I think just tied into the Hayward stuff a little bit, the Monica being so supportive of Wanda so quickly was a little bit unbelievable, maybe, although she obviously knows what's happened with the Avengers and everything. But that was the one point of the show where I'm like, why is she so strongly in support of her? But I
she
think
also
overall,
she
it
also
worked out and
states
we
that like
understood it.
she's experienced her grief while she was in the Hex.
Yeah,
she could feel
yeah.
her grief. So I
That's
think
right.
that may have been like a relatable moment for her.
Sure. No, and that's a good point, Chris.
I would say one of my least favorite things is a lot of the stuff with the kids. For whatever reason, I just
Really?
wasn't as connected with her and her children. Like a mother and her children, her losing them should feel really powerful, right? And there should be this unbreakable bond and this attachment. But because I guess the nature of how the show functioned, that just never came across to me. Like even Vision's memory is so much stronger and Vision himself is a stronger character than the kids, that especially the kids aging so rapidly, I think the rapidly thing, it really made them feel not real. And so to the point of my girlfriend watching the show and being like, so what are the kids, dogs? Like my girlfriend thought that the children were dogs that she made kids because of their lack of being interesting characters.
I have to be honest, that's actually my favorite fan theory out of all of them.
I'm telling you, she told me, and I was like, they could.
If they are
and
dogs.
I took it to you guys in the chat, and I was like, no. But seriously, the show has not, it would make sense if it was revealed that they were puppies. They grow real fast, you know?
I would have been like, okay. That's what they're doing.
But I would say for me, like within the stronger parts of the show, I was wanting a little more from the relationship of the kids and Wanda, and I just don't feel like it like when she says goodnight to her kids for the last time, I'm like, they never were real anyway. They're based off of nothingness, and I don't know any of their names. I think one of you said one's name is Wickety.
It's Billy and Tommy.
Billy and Tommy, Wiccan and
Split?
Speed.
Wickety Split.
Wiccan and Speed. I do have to say, speaking to that
Which is
moment,
what I'm going to be doing after this show ends.
oh my god! Speaking to that moment from personal experience, when she said goodbye, it got to me in particular because when she stops in the doorway and says, "Thank you for choosing me to be your mom." That's actually something that my mom used to say to me, and I was like, what? Like, that is so heartbreaking, only because I have that personal connection to that dialogue, but to get a little transparent,
Your mom,
it hit me pretty hard.
Your mom has said that to me before too. It's very sweet.
God damn it.
But to add to what Chris' point as well, is because a lot of parents don't feel like they're, great parents because they do the best what they could, because there's no parent type of manual. They do what they're taught from our own parents, from their grandparents and everything. So that line also hit me because my mom actually said it to me as well, but in the Spanish version, not the English version.
Right.
So when my mom be like, hey, I know I'm not the best mom, but I appreciate you for always being by my side. Like, damn. And then when Wanda said, like, it's almost the same in English, so I can understand that very well. I like that.
I think
Very
by
impactful.
definition, Wanda is a terrible mother. She's awful. Quite horrific, actually. Think about it. She created her kids and then went to her kids after they were like the age of 11 and said, I know I created you, but I need to uncreate you now. And then murdered
She didn't
the
have a
children
choice. She didn't have a choice.
I beg to differ. She could have made a place.
She could have just continued living in the hex, and then that character would have experienced no emotional growth whatsoever.
Just make a tiny hex for your kids to live.
As we've seen, she may be trying to make them happen again.
Oh, those kids are coming out of the multiverse, bro.
Some
100%.
implications at the end.
Those are some
there,
demon children. Do they have souls? I have questions.
Yeah, it's going to be a Pet Cemetery sequel starring Wanda, and I'm here for it.
Also,
and we might finally see Mephisto. Or technically Catan.
It also leads me to, like, people found this like a touching moment. And it was like touching in some ways, but I was also disturbed when Vision asked, right before he's about to be evaporated, he says, what am I? And she goes, oh, you're the piece of the Mind Stone within me. And then you're also random flesh and bones and blood, like machine parts
Wires,
and bones.
bone, and blood that I made. Bro, I'm
just
going to push
imagining
back
all
so
these
hard on this
dead-
right now.
these
You
dead-
are fucking crazy. Yeah. That moment had me in tears.
Christian
you
is
are
heartless.
insane.
And my fiance calls me heartless, and I was all crying. I'm like, hey,
you are
babe,
crazy, bro.
If I was Vision, I'd
crying?
go, whose bones? Because I just imagine when she was creating them in her grief, there was like dead dog skeletons and squirrels and like things coming from the ground and like random car wires.
That conversation is so in line with who Vision is as a character, though, because he's always struggled with his identity. Like, of course, that's something that he would ask her at the very end. And her response is so beautiful and genuine and heartfelt. You're a monster for not crying during that scene. I love you, but you're a monster.
I was hoping she just said, "You're just a dog. You're a dog.
You're just a dog."
Just from this episode, I've learned more about Christian, of how heartless he is and cold. He has no emotions. So I really wonder, like, how does he express his emotions to his partner?
Are
like,
you a synthezoid?
You know who's really heartless? Vision and her 2 children.
Literally.
They have more emotions than you.
Vash, you've yet to experience that. Most of the time that James comes on the show, Christian just shits on everything that James and I love, basically.
It's a bit of a trope at this point.
I'm doing in Wiccan and Speed off of Ralph Bohner right now.
Oh my god.
That's a wild weekend.
I did have a question for you nerds before we depart, because we need to get the fuck out of here.
Because we can't reach that 2 hour 15 mark, right, guys? We can't reach that.
Dangerously
We didn't even
close,
talk about where it fits into the MCU.
I did have a nerd question. Ralph Bohner, right?
His friends call him Ray.
How is he super fast?
Because the necklace, like he was,
yeah,
it's like he was in dominatrix, with the whole necklace. He loves to be, pull, manhandle.
What?
BDSM undertones.
I'm assuming that Agatha gave him those abilities through the possession of the necklace as well.
Correct. That's what I lead into.
So you can just get any
way.
superpower from.
She's a witch, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it was meant to match her brothers so that she could get information from Wanda about how she created the hex. So it had to be as close to her brother as possible.
Okay, yeah. Incantation it is. Oh, one little Easter egg I wanted to point out. I was rewatching the first episode, and Agatha, when she's introduced, she goes, "Oh, I'm your neighbor Agnes," and then she goes, "Oh, I'm Wanda," and then Agnes says, "Charmed." I was like, oh, right from the get-go, you guys knew what was up.
That's amazing.
I actually am looking forward to rewatching the series, as much as I shit on half of it. I actually kind of want to rewatch it with the context to see how, thoughtful the little, knowing the actual thing, not theorizing on little things that you see in the background, just knowing the show, rewatching it. I think it'd be excellent for that.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to doing that as well.
James, I didn't give you a chance. Did you have a least favorite moment in the series?
It's barely a negative. It's more like a nitpick based on my own personal expectations that I put on the show. But when Monica talks about the aerospace engineer friend that she has, I just felt like it was a missed opportunity to introduce someone like Reed Richards or to introduce someone like Blue Marvel into the MCU. My preference would have been Reed Richards, because Reed Richards and Sue Storm being a part of SWORD instantly explains how they would end up in the cosmic cloud that gives them their powers. And we do know that the Fantastic Four is coming in the next phase. So I just felt like it was a missed opportunity to do something really, really cool, but it's just a minor nitpick. I don't really have any negatives.
Right. It would be very cool, and it'd be exploring the form of the MCU in an interesting way. But you got to imagine that the people writing the Fantastic Four don't want audiences to come into these movies and it be like, oh, that origin story was in a TV show on Disney Plus.
Right. Of course.
I think that's the trickiest part. That they're just that's just not practical for a 4-quadrant Disney Marvel flick. Also because they don't have balls in this to do crazy shit that you would think that would be possible in this format. Just kidding. From a business perspective, it makes total sense. It's money. It's money. The reason you didn't get what you wanted is money. So that's what we thought. Very quickly, I feel like we did cover a lot of how this series ranks in the MCU. I think we're there. Do we have any final thoughts? Anything important as far as how this fits into the MCU?
I'll just say real quick. Sorry, Vash, didn't mean to cut you off. But I'll just say real quick. I thought about this deeply. It is my 4th favorite thing in the MCU. Number 1 for me is Winter Soldier. I just love that movie because of my attachment to Captain America himself. I thought the writing, the score, everything that movie was on point. Endgame, Infinity War, and then I got to put WandaVision at number 4 for me.
Wow,
that's awesome.
For me, the one thing I wish that was as much as people are fan theorists and everything. And we heard the news outlet and everything announcing how Wanda will be part of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I wish Doctor Strange did put up at the post-credit scene because it shows that, there's a connection. That's the one thing the weak storyline of MCU holds, is that the audience, we're supposed to expect everything connects. Yes, we know with the post-credits all the time, but it would have been nice that Doctor Strange at least shows up like, hey, I came here to bargain or something like that. That would have been nice. A nice connection with, we're going to see her show up within Doctor Strange and everything. Because he shows up at the cabin, or at least, I see something going on with the world, or who's now stronger than me. Like, I wish something like that would holding up. And with where WandaVision holds up in the rankings, it's of course Thor, The Dark World, Captain Marvel, Iron Man 3, and the WandaVision.
Stop. You have been removed from Villains, my friend. Sorry.
Vash has left the chat.
All jokes aside, I don't know where it ranks within the 23 films, and now with a TV show, I don't know where yet. I need to really think about it, but I would say it's definitely my top 5, top 10 within WandaVision. It's such a great storytelling, one of the best written, one of the best cohesive story of character build and adding layers than what we already know, and plus established characters and adding more to it.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like, I actually tried to create a list like James, hoping that I still had the list from when we ranked all of our Marvel movies, like 2 years ago at this point. That list is long gone.
We need to re-rank them and then listen and then see how full of shit we are.
I think that would be a great thought experiment. That would be a lot of fun. But having not put an actual list together, I would guess that this show cracks my top 5. That's how much I liked it. I don't know what would get pushed out of the top 5. And yes, there are 23 films, and that top 5 list was already very tight when we did it a couple years ago. But I think it's fair to say this would crack the top 5. Push something out.
Wow, you guys really like this show. Brian.
I did, yeah.
I'm glad. I'm very happy.
I didn't make a list. I think it's not the funniest thing the MCU's ever done. The action is not the best the MCU's ever done, but the dramatic stuff is definitely up there with some of the most emotionally impactful stuff in the MCU for me. And the fact that it's obviously there's 23 movies before this, but I think it's relatively self-contained in a surprising way, given all of the external stuff that came before it. So I think that's really where it shines. And like I said, even though, Christian, you don't think they're taking the biggest chances, I thought they were doing a lot of really experimental stuff that we hadn't seen before. So yeah, it gives me hope going forward for sure.
Yeah, I was surprised. It's better. It's the best MCU TV show. For sure.
So far.
I think it's good. I think ranking it against movies is weird. I actually really appreciate it in a different way. It's hard to compare this to a movie. I think it has this emotional payoff because we spend there's just a lot less action
time. Yeah.
And there's more time with the characters. So I think it's just a product of time, to be honest. Because I think the emotional highs of Endgame really wrap up our time with the MCU, right? And for me, that's still the most emotional thing because there's just so many characters that hit this breaking point, right?
And the stakes are so high as well.
Yeah. They couldn't be higher. They are high to the sky, Ralph Bohner style. And I added some things to the notes. I don't know if you saw.
Very relevant to the conversation.
I really like it, and I appreciated that it had so much to do with the MCU and in and of itself was contained to the story that it was trying to tell. And I'm very, very excited for the stories that we're going to get. It makes me hopeful for not only the new MCU movies, but also just the potential of MCU shows as entertainment. And we're already, right, we're getting Falcon Winter Soldier.
The Falcon and the Winter Soldier
on the 19th.
Start, yep, on the 19th. So 2 weeks, no. Yes, 2 weeks from when this episode airs.
And then Loki 2 weeks after that, I think.
June
right?
11th. June 11th, Loki starts.
Right, it's crazy. So we're gonna have a lot of really fun television. It's definitely I love the weekly thing. I mean, it was really wonderful chatting with you guys, being on the C4S Villains podcast. Thanks for having me on, Vash and James. I really appreciate it. It's awesome talking to you guys.
You'll be on for the Snyder Cut. I can't wait.
You know who loves a good Snyder Cut? Ralph Bohner.
Dude, the Snyder Cut episode of Villains is going to be Popaholics-tastic.
It's going to be 8 hours long.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be as long as the Snyder Cut, which we're very excited to do. So in wrapping up, I think this is great. I have a lot of hope for the MCU. And if the shows are this good or better or a little worse, I that's solid. That's great TV. That I think that'll justify Disney Plus for quite a lot of people that are fans of the MCU. That's for sure.
Oh, no doubt.
So that is WandaVision. Tell us what you thought of WandaVision and Ralph Bohner by emailing us at popaholicscast.ralphbohner.com.
We're changing the email.
popaholicscast@gmail.com. Rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcast. That's really awesome. Write a review. We will read it aloud on our weekly upload. You can check out those weekly uploads every Monday. We talk about the latest in pop culture, talk about news, we talk about the MCU, we talk about all sorts of shit. It's a lot of fun. Vash and James, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
You guys can find me on Twitter at JBExclusive and at C4 Spoilers. Of course, you can find us on the Careful for Spoilers YouTube channel, where we do C4S Villains every single Friday. I also do trailer reaction videos. Vash and I are actually going to review Coming to America sometime this week, whenever we can find some time. But check us out over there. Definitely subscribe so that you can see the Popaholics crew with us on C4S Villains to talk about the Snyder Cut, because that is going to be an absolute blast. So guys, thank you so much for letting me be on this episode again. It's always a blast just getting to talk to you guys.
Can I point out what a professional James is? Because you said Coming to America in the only way that you could possibly say it to have any idea of what you're talking about. That was very thoughtful of you. I just want to point out
you have to emphasize
excellent,
the two. Yeah.
Excellent broadcasting skills. Vash?
Thank you, sir.
And just like my host said, James, I appreciate for always finding us on the Villain Show. It's an honor to always have us every week on Fridays, and you can find us here talking about comic book shows, comic book news, and review The Flash coming this coming week, and Superman, Lois, other stuff that will be announcing, Zack Snyder, and everything else. And you can find me and James with our host Sam on every Thursday nights for the evening of the Animated Podcast as well. Thank you very much for having us here again, and hopefully I could be able to come back, because I definitely had a boner throughout the whole show.
A big old Ralph Boner through the whole show.
That wasn't even a Ralph Boner joke. You just said you had a boner. Teach you how this Ralph Boner funny business works, my friend.
Thank you both for coming back. This was so much fun. I'm glad we had you on again.
Yes, it's always a great time.
It's a blast every time.
It was an honor.
It was such a pleasure to have you. Chris and Brian, where can people find more of your stuff on the webs?
Loyal listeners, you can find me on Twitter talking about movies and television shows and video games and my designer action figure collection at Chris Conkling. Come join me with all of my ridiculous ramblings about nerd nonsense.
And you can find me on Twitter at TruePopaholic.
And you can find me at ralph.boner.bit.ly. And I'll be taking your questions. I'm going to do a Ask Me Anything this coming tomorrow. That'll do it for this episode.